So they say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Councillor Lewiston, during the January 16th City Hall meeting, you instructed opponents of LD 1492 to get out of the way because you believe that true integration is good for Maine. So I'm going to play along. Let us assume then that the progressive endeavor to pepper Maine with immigrants is generally altruistic in nature and that there is no malice at all. What advice would you give to the family of the young lady who was gang raped by Garang Majuk and his buddies? Should they get out of the way? How about the taxpayers fleeced by Ali Daham and members of the Islamic community who participated in the EBT fraud at the Aram Halal market in Portland? Millions of dollars were stolen. No big deal, right? We should not contest the issue, but just get out of the way. How about the taxpayers who supported Adnan Fazeli before he went to fight for ISIS? Should we not be concerned about financing terrorism? Certainly not. Just get out of the way. Councillor Beam, on January 16th, you gushed over the proposal and proclaimed that the initiative will pay for itself. There will be so much happiness that money will just magically appear, like the pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. In the real world, sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows bring smiles, but they seldom pay the bills. I disagree with the premise that Maine's economic problems come from being too old or too white. I do not believe that mass immigration is a remedy. In fact, there's plenty of evidence out there to suggest that the reverse is true. At the same meeting, Phil Netto mentioned the Hmong population of Wausau, Wisconsin as a model. A column in The Atlantic in 1994 offers a different perspective on Wausau's diversity experiment. And suffice it to say, the taxpayers of Wisconsin have not been celebrating. The author of the piece notes that the idea of a moratorium on immigration comes up often in discussions in Wausau. Many people told me that they don't raise the idea in public because they believe that religious, media, and government leaders would readily label any kind of criticism of immigration a manifestation of racism. And if you're paying attention to the headlines recently, sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? And Mr. Lewiston says the naysayers of immigration are just filled with fear and hate. Mr. Mayor, on January 16th, you gavelled Jason Lavoie down for coming dangerously close to, as you put it, almost having an issue. An issue over what? Telling the truth? I'm not fearful. I'm not a hater. I'm a realist. Assimilation, it's not happening. Mr. Netto mentioned Wausau, so permit me to point to scores of Sharia-compliant communities in Minnesota, Michigan, New York, England, France, Germany, and a myriad of others with no-go zones. Talking to some of the local police here, it's kind of getting that way as well. They're called Muslim enclaves. But both the Hamtramck and Dearborn communities in Michigan have undergone a catastrophic demographic shift over the past few decades. In the early 20th century, Hamtramck was a predominantly Polish Catholic community. Now the city council is mostly Muslim. The Adhan, the Muslim call to prayer, starts promptly at 0600. Many residents have complained about the noise, but have been threatened with defamation lawsuits. Interesting to note that South Portland, they're going that way, that you can't even mention the truth without committing a hate crime. Buffalo, New York is another one. It has been so inviting to newcomers from Afghanistan, Yemen, Sudan, Somalia, and Iraq that they've moved in, shut down certain areas of the city, and amplified criminal activity, including drug trafficking. The welfare fraud committed by refugees in Buffalo is very similar to what the FBI found at the Aram Halal market in Portland. How's that for hospitality? It's not very difficult to connect the dots from Europe to Maine. England has 85 Sharia-compliant courts. In France, there are hundreds of Muslim enclaves that are off-limits to police. This didn't happen overnight, but rather because of years of progressive policies that gradually undermined the freedom and culture of Europe. Many now refer to Europe as Eurabia. The truth is that plenty of damage has already been done here in Maine. Residents of Portland, Lewiston, and Auburn are experiencing rising rent prices, overcrowding schools, and increased property taxes to pay for the transformation of their communities. The cost is considerably higher than the progressives will ever admit, and it's only the tip of the iceberg. They have run Maine's economy into the ground, driven producers out of the state, and now they propose a fix that is downright nuclear. For them, it's not enough to provide for and utilize the immigrants already here. They keep calling for more, more, more. And in fact, that's the very initiative of LD 1492, to attract more. Any one of you think that fostering the growth of terror cells in Maine is a good idea? The FBI reports that it has active ISIS investigations in all 50 states. We know of at least 2 Islamic State fighters who later died on the battlefield in the Middle East after coming to Maine as refugees. Should we feel relieved that they decided to go to Syria and Lebanon rather than steal a box truck and mow down infidels on the street in Portland or Freeport, or how about downtown Lisbon Street here in Lewiston? We're facing an existential threat. The economic impact pales in comparison to the ideological, sociological, cultural shift if the progressive elites get their way. We've seen this movie before, and it doesn't end happily. The welfare state doesn't mix well with open borders. All you got to do is look to guys like Dr. Walter Williams. He'll tell you that. Only a fool would think we will have a different outcome here. I'm a husband, father, and veteran who knows that the productive will end up paying dearly for all of this. So, Mr. Lyson, Councilor Lyson, I'm not going to get out of the way.